Hello all, welcome to our session today with Bill Gye, our virtual cafe. I think our numbers have stopped going up, so I think we'll kick off. My name's Melanie Rolfe. I'm one of the NextGen researchers in the NextGen Research Network component of the Alive National Centre for Mental Health Research Translation. And I'm really excited about our cafe chat today with Bill Gye. But before we get into all of that, I've just got a few sort of housekeeping things to get through. So I'll go through those to kick us off. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the traditional lands that we're all joining from today. If you'd like to acknowledge where you're joining from, please feel free to do so in the chat. I'm joining from Meanjin, and I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people as the traditional owners of the lands that I'm coming from today, and acknowledge the contribution that they play to our communities, and hope that we can continue to learn from them and move forward together. I'll make a quick note on language that's used in a lot of our online webinars within the Alive network. We are talking about some topics that are traditionally tough to talk about: mental health, suicidality, distress, social and emotional well-being. And I'd just like to remind everyone that at any point, if it feels like it's too much for you, feel free to step away, have a cuppa, come back, put us on mute, and then come back when you're feeling ready. And this will also be recorded and available online if you want to come back to it at another time and take your time to go through it. So if you're new to the Alive network, welcome. Great to have you here. The Alive Centre's mission is to transform mental health and wellbeing through primary care and community action. And what Bill has been doing in this space is wonderful and such an alignment with that mission. Really excited to hear a bit about that today. As part of that, we've got a number of sort of subcommittees, including the Lived Experience Network, and recognising that these sessions often bring people in with lived experience. So I'd like to acknowledge anyone who's coming today with lived experience and gratitude for being here. And if there's any additional supports or additional things that you think that we could do differently in other webinars, please let us know about that. And yeah, we just aim to recognise and acknowledge that lived experience throughout the whole session. I want to do a quick touch on our next webinar coming up, which is a very special one for World Mental Health Day, and it'll be focusing on mental health in the workplace, which I think is an incredibly important component of sort of the community outreach aspect and preventative and early intervention sort of components, and how we can work together as communities in different settings to support wellbeing as a general construct. This is going to be a hybrid event. We've got some wonderful panelists coming in to speak from all different backgrounds, including lived experience, public health, and workplace sort of specialists. And a number of these will actually be co-hosted live at universities around the country. Some of them that are actually going to feed people afterwards and have some community building over food as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, we'd love to see you at that. You can register at that link or the QR code there if you want to come along to that, and keep an eye on the socials as well for the link to register. Today's session is hosted by the Next Generation Researcher Network, which is the component of the Alive network that I'm part of. It's a wonderful network of early career researchers who are passionate about mental health. We've got a really broad range of areas of interest and expertise. And we've currently got 279 members across Australia. So if that's something that you'd like to be part of, we would love to see you at those meetings and get to know your areas of interest, and yeah, for you to help shape sort of events and things like this. And that's us. That's us yeah, the co-leads of the network currently. So to the main event, I am really happy to be introducing today Bill Gye, who's been the recent CEO of Community Mental Health Australia and been part of a number of community organisations focused on grassroots, really innovative community-based mental health promotion activities. And he's going to be talking to us today about the ACDC Project, which is the best use of an acronym I've ever heard in academia or health. And it's a wonderful, wonderful activity where they're really connecting communities with mental health and with their communities. So I'm really excited to hear a bit more about it. So welcome, Bill. I'll stop sharing so that you can take over. So nice to have you today, Bill.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks for that, and thanks also to the rest of the team there in Alive, the mental health research and translation team. It's great to be here, and also too, there's a number of people I know and a number of friendly faces that I'm yet to see here that are sitting in the background here. So it's great to have you there. I even think my own daughter has snuck in here, but don't tell anyone right now, which is really great to see her, my wonderful daughter. And I'll also maybe make reference to some of the people here who are involved in the ACDC project during the presentation here. But first, let's just start the sharing process to make sure that I can get that working. It's always good to get the technology right, and you feel a lot better. Oh, there we go. Right. So, is that working for everybody? Can you see? Can anybody tell me whether they can see?
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Perfect. Thanks, Bill.
Right. Okay. So, I'd also like to acknowledge country and that I'm on the lands of the Gadigal people in the Sydney Northern Beaches, and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we all live and work. The focus today is on the proactive outreach approach, which is a component of the ACDC project. The ACDC project was an initiative of Community Mental Health Australia, and is an initiative of Community Mental Health Australia because it's ongoing now, and I'll talk about that. The research and evaluation of the project and the partner in the project was the wonderful Centre for Social Impact. And yes, just looking at the screen there, we don't want ambulances at the bottom of the cliff, but we do want early intervention, which is always prevention at a later stage. And proactive outreach speaks to both of those. I'd like to begin, though, with just a quick look at the near future context that we are in terms of services that would benefit from proactive outreach. Some of you may be aware of these, and I'll say why I've mentioned these at the beginning. First, there's the National Early Intervention Service. That's not the early intervention stream in the NDIS. This is the non-NDIS Early Intervention Service, coming hopefully in 2025-26. There's already 163.9 million allocated in the 23-24 budget, and it's for approximately 150,000 people with mild, moderate mental health challenges. It'll be free with no referral required, and details to be determined. It'll be great. It won't be sufficient funds for the scale of the issue to do it well, but it'll still be useful and something that will be part of the fairly complex landscape of bits and pieces and bits and bobs that we've got in the what we might broadly call, with slightly flattering intent, the mental health system. Second is importantly, the targeted foundation or psychosocial supports. For those that have been part of this journey, this I think can be, if it's done well, a real game changer. It can be the realization of a dream for an expanded community mental health focus, to move out of the exclusive focus, particularly on emergency and public mental health system and beds, etc. If we can do that well, and if it's done on the scale and with the quality that we actually need, with greater involvement of people with lived experience. For those that are coming along to next week, or the next session, I should say, of this event, particularly with Mark Cross, I really recommend reading Mark Cross's book on the state of Australia's mental health system, called Mental State. And certainly he makes a very strong call for the need for something like this. So let's hope we can deliver. It'll be free. There'll be an eligibility assessment. And the foundational supports consultations are starting to begin right now. There is a link here, which I'll try and grab and put into the chat a little bit later, but there is a consultation happening tomorrow, I think at 12 o'clock, which is a good place to start if you've not already got your head around what's going to be happening in the foundational supports. And there's other programs coming that proactive outreach will be relevant for. But first, what is proactive outreach? Why do we need it? Why don't we need it? Or why don't we want it? Types and examples, and the ACDC project. So first, an acronym clarification. So yes, ACDC is assisting communities through direct connection and not those other things, although it's been useful to leverage off the fact that this is a well-known acronym. So I want to thank the band and Tesla and Westinghouse and those that have designed our electrical system for getting the word out there. I'd also like to begin with a safety warning that I will give at the beginning and at the end. And I think this is important. It's important that the ACDC style proactive outreach has high quality and safety guardrails. And you'll understand why as we talk about it a little bit more. What's important is the quality of the connection, using a trained, caring person who is mainly listening and who can create a trusting and safe space. And I know one of the people on this meeting right now is Julia Millard, who's been very central and seminal in helping us design a training course that actually helps to underwrite that. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. We have, importantly, a no agenda approach. We're not trying to do anything at the door. We're not selling anything. And that's really important because people's radar for people with agendas is really acute. And so this approach only works if it's purely for the person. You're not trying to sell anything, and you're there to understand the needs of each individual and with a holistic perspective, holistic approach. It needs to be flexible, and the people connectors really have to respond on each individual occasion with an openness, and have an opportunity and willingness to spend time with the person, and if needed, assist them to find support. Now, there's a video here, and I think it's in two places, and I'm going to show it a little bit later on. It's useful because it really gives a kind of an idea of what I'm talking about, but I'll hold off, particularly also too, it's sometimes a bit challenging doing video through Zoom, but we'll see how we go a little bit later on. So I'll come back to that in a few minutes' time. Oops. So the first question, as I said, what's proactive outreach? Well, very simply, it's investing resources into finding and connecting with people in need. Finding and connecting with people in need who, through other processes, well, through who you will miss if you actually don't go through a process like this. And it's contrasted with follow-up or reactive outreach after servicing. For example, for those that are familiar with the terminology, assertive outreach, that was a common term used in the mental health services previously, but it's still a useful approach if you understand what it means. The word assertive is a bit aggressive, but it was well meant. More particularly, what's proactive outreach in mental health? It's proactively identifying and engaging with community members who may be isolated or at risk of declining mental health, and encouraging participation in activities that promote mental well-being and prevent the onset of mental health crises. But why do we need it? Well, several reasons. One, it's one of the best ways to really get down and dirty and get a coal-faced understanding of what's happening at a community level. And if done in the right way at a particular community, it can be a process to help bind fragmented communities together. It's focused on prevention and early intervention, as I've said, and that's really important, and that'll come out more in what we're talking about. And part of that is finding people most in need of new services. And I'll focus on that in a moment. And why this approach is really good for finding such people. And when I say such people, that's us, of course. And I don't mean to be insensitive in using third-person language, so pardon me there. Really also important for decreasing stigma, getting out there, talking to people about issues that are awkward for people to talk about. But in the process of talking about it, it's a great way for people to get comfortable and to then for them to share that comfort or that ability to talk about these things with others and their friends and their networks. And particularly, it's necessary to overcome the barriers to help seeking, which is something other I just want to dwell on at the moment. Overcoming barriers to help seeking. So there is a significant body of literature out there which shows how many and how significant the barriers are to help seeking, not just in mental health services, but in health generally. But this report here, which hopefully you guys will get a copy of this PowerPoint display and we'll be able to have a look at it there. So 58% of people do not seek help for clinical level mental health challenges. Very large report there. Over here, when you get this, if you click here for a collection of papers on barriers to help seeking, the ACDC project undertook 2 literature reviews, one by the Centre for Social Impact and another one, it escapes me who we had it done with. But this provides you a link to that collection of papers, at least the subsection on the barriers to help seeking, of which there was about a dozen papers and meta studies done on that and why it's so important. One of the many papers there was this one here, intersecting systemic and personal barriers to accessing social services. It was over in the States, but the findings still very relevant. So it highlighted the need for the advocacy to address 2 problems: the availability, adequacy, accessibility, and appropriateness of services, all really important. Probably should throw in affordability in there as well, but also the personal barriers to accessing services faced by people struggling with health and social issues. The ACDC findings themselves, and we'll go in more into detail on those as this presentation flows through, was that of households who reported a desire to seek mental health support, N887, 53.5% did not get the support they needed. Really big number. Now, what were the reasons for that? There was multiple reasons, but the top 6 reasons for not seeking help was: 1, I prefer to manage myself, and I was afraid, embarrassed to ask. The top 2 there are really significant. And then there's, I didn't know where to get help, I couldn't afford the service, etc. But let's just focus in on that. I prefer to manage myself, and I was afraid to ask. And I'm just going to take a little diversion. First of all, just to repeat, there's 2 problems here. There's that there are the missing services, or they're not accessible, affordable, etc. And that's what a lot of us focus on in our advocacy. But also this second issue, the help-seeking avoidance due to stigma, shame, hesitancy, reluctance, previous bad experiences, etc. Really, really important issue. But warning, sidebar 1, my capacity to tangent is quite considerable, so I've had to discipline it, but I'm allowing myself 1 tangent here. So sidebar 1, toughing it out, which is what we do quite often. We look after ourselves. I don't need your help. Nobody needs my help. I can do this myself. Versus what I've called equipped resilience or healthy resilience. So thank you, Dali, for the image here. But the point being that you can be in adverse circumstances, but if you're well prepared, you can cope and manage with those quite well. If you try to tough it out, you'll be okay for a little while, but then it gets tough. So when the going gets tough, the tough get equipped is the saying. I'd like to have a t-shirt with that on it. So the definitions here: toughing it out is independence in adverse circumstances, what most people default to most of the time. Self-care competency, the skills and habits of maintaining well-being in adverse circumstances. We don't do that very well as a society, and we need to include those habits, just like you do cleaning your teeth, etc. Once those sorts of habits of well-being are broad and widely embedded, I think that will be a significant contributor to improving over broader population mental health. And if we can improve broader population mental health, everybody benefits. So healthy resilience is, yes, life is tough and we need to tough it out, but you've got the capacity for self-care competency, means you're more sustainable, you can last longer, and you're less likely to move into a crisis. So back to the agenda. Next one was, why not do proactive outreach? And this comes out of conversations that we've had with people, but also you could come up with these and you can see why this is the case yourself. Services are already overloaded. Don't dig up more problems. We've got enough right now, enough people. There's a queue. Thanks very much. Go away. We're too busy. We don't have the resources to do proactive outreach. Don't set people up for failure or raise false expectations. In other words, don't go out there talking to people about their needs and then find out that, and then have to disappoint them that there's not the supports and services around to help them meet those particular needs. And it also isn't going uninvited to people's homes, an invasion of their privacy and personal space. That's where they try to get away from everybody and have a little bit of quiet time. Now, each of those you could discuss in detail there, but I don't think any of them is a knockout punch. If you don't find out what the needs are out there, you're not well informed, and that means that therefore you're only going to be reacting to the people in more or less who are pushing forward in their needs in acute crisis situations more often than not. And you don't have to raise false expectations. Part of the process of ACDC was making people very aware of the lack of supports and services and getting their views on what they would like, what would work for them, and help us provide, or through that process, help collate information that could be provided to local planners in terms of what's needed and what's being expressed on the ground. Particularly strong desire out there for peer support came through very strongly in many of the sites we're at. I think probably one of the main reasons is the hidden one, though, that last one at the bottom. It's scary going out there, and having done that ourselves, we realize how difficult it is. It is great when you do it, and if we had time, we'd talk about the wonderful experience that many people connectors had once they got over that fear, and how great it was to really get to be close with people and get a sense of what it was like for many people in their community. Now, the ACDC process is, I'm arguing, one particular type or example of proactive outreach. And if we had more time, I would explore all of those with you. There is the door-to-door approach where we go to every household, or pretty much every household. There's local inter-service liaison and networks that was used in the project, but it's another avenue for infiltrating out into the community. Informal network groups, group activities, community events, peer support networks, social prescribing and proactive outreach. Now, there's a really interesting conversation that I'd love to have with somebody other. Of course, public awareness campaigns. There are all sorts of ways that you can do that, and we need to be more creative with those, and they are a part of it. And then there's also some digital tools that can be used. Now, I'm not going to go through these. These are all the different methods. If anybody wanted to, any organization wanted to do a workshop on proactive outreach or how it might fit into your organization, we could spend a bit of time on exploring how these particular ones might actually work for you in the context of your service. But sadly, we haven't got time to go into details on all those. So I'll flip past them and just whet your appetite there, and see whether or not later on anybody's interested in getting into more detail about how this could be applied. The proactive outreach approach could be applied within the context of your organization. So the ACDC project itself started in COVID, and right at the very beginning of COVID, the grant was received. And thank you, by the way, to originally the NDIS and now DSS, the Department of Social Services, for their wonderful ILC grant and their support of this particular project. So because we launched off during COVID in early 2020, it was both a challenge and an advantage. It was a challenge, of course. Going to people's doors during a pandemic seems like not a great idea, but we judiciously chose our sites and places we went to get around that barrier. But more importantly, it actually worked quite well because everybody was getting their food delivered, and so wellness delivered sort of fitted in quite well. And also, too, it was kind of neat. Somebody kind of got, if you had two people knocking on your door with T-shirts and identification, who sort of opened with hi, we're not trying to sell anything. We're not from a religious organization. We're not trying to get your vote here. But we're from so-and-so organization, and we're just doing a well-being check in the whatever MacArthur community about how you're going. And so people at the door kind of, it sort of seemed to fit in well. We're locked in homes mainly. We're particularly homebound, and now these really nice people are coming around to check to see how I am, and so that worked quite well. And we sort of continued that trend on, and that same sense of just doing a check-in with the community to see how people are going, and that worked quite well, and people kind of got that. So we went to over 26 sites across Australia in every state and territory. It's an example of one of the many sites we went to in South Burnett. There were several rounds, including the original piloting one that was where the ACDC central staff themselves did it, so that we got a sense of what it was like at the coalface ourselves to do this. And then a series of other rounds over those periods of time. There are 4 reports which are accessible from the website, which is acdc.org.au, as you might have seen on the very first slide. Thanks again to the wonderful Centre for Social Impact for each of those reports. There is the door, just be careful there. There's the door-to-door summary report. There's one for round 2 and also round 3. And the round 3 report is the most recent, but there are still things in the round 2 report that are not repeated in the round 3 report. So they're both worth reading if you're a sucker for punishment there. But the data there particularly is very useful. There's as we'll see, there's all sorts of interesting findings. And one of the commitments of the ACDC project was to make all of its material eventually available through the Australian Data Archive. So the data from this study, and we'll talk about that shortly, will be available to researchers. And I know this is a research network, and so hopefully that may well be of something that's of value to you. And also the resources that we've actually developed, the training course, etc., will be something that we committed to making public available. And you don't do it without that proper preparation, as I said before. There was significant media coverage, and this is just a tip of the iceberg. The number of times we're on radio, particularly community radio, doing interviews, but also ABC and other radios. And there was newspaper stories and magazine articles. So really significant amount of media coverage on this. I think because it was unusual. There were people in somebody's neighborhood going door to door. And that happened after we distributed information to let people in the community know that we're actually coming, by providing things in the letterbox, so many people were expecting us to be there. So great media coverage. There's also, we have 5 academic papers, if I can call them that, using the ACDC data coming soon. One on loneliness and diverse Australian communities with the wonderful Dr. Michelle Lim and Professor Lisa Brophy. What do you need to feel safe and well? Community engagement, barriers to accessing help, as I've been talking, and the social determinants and mental health. One of the really significant findings was verification of the really strong correlation between the social determinants and mental health issues. And I'll touch on that in a moment. To get a quick flavor of it, though, there are 3 videos on the website that I'd recommend having a look at because it makes that a little bit real. And one of those, I'm now going to try to see if it actually flies. So often when you show a video on Zoom, it can be a little bit, it grabs a little bit, there's little bits of breaks, but I'll depend upon one of the organizers just to tell me whether it's hopeless and we have to stop or whether it's sort of watchable. It does go for 3 minutes and takes up a bit of our time, but I think it's really worth it because it'll give you a totally different perspective other than just my boring voice going on and on. Well, hopefully not too boring.
The findings from the ACDC project.
Yeah, that's good, Bill.
Not only have we tested and piloted the proactive outreach project, we found that the level of distress and mental health issues is very wide, varying from different communities across the country. So organizations can really benefit from the proactive outreach approach because it allows them to access people that would really benefit from their particular services, but who they won't connect to unless they've got a proactive outreach approach as part of their service delivery.
They're actually going out there, they're knocking on doors, they're telling people about us, and they're increasing the mental health literacy in our community, which is, you know, absolutely a great thing for us.
So it was a great partnership to work with one of the peak bodies, and I think it's really important to have that collaboration and partnership. They have a lot of expertise in that area, and we wanted to leverage off their resources and support.
In terms of how the community benefited from the ACDC project, it's largely around increasing accessibility. And very much about normalizing mental health support seeking.
Because a lot of the community did not know themselves about the local services that were provided.
The ACDC project played an important role in reducing the stigma and shame associated with seeking support around mental health services.
It was a good opportunity for us as well to introduce our programs to them.
Hopefully, at this point in time, the community is a little bit more aware that they can seek support before there is a big explosion of symptoms. It's maybe about getting that early intervention.
Organisations, particularly those working in the mental health sphere, need to move upstream to where people are being pushed into the river, not waiting downstream to pull them out of the river where they're struggling and drowning.
We support delivery partner organisations to really get an understanding of the service landscape in their communities.
We were surprised as an organisation about how many local services there are in Dandenong around supporting people with their health and wellbeing and their mental health as well.
It improves referral pathways, and also it leads to sector collaboration where services are talking to each other and really improving community outcomes.
Well, one of the organisational benefits of the ACDC project is it's wonderful training for your staff.
Our staff, they feel empowered because they've, through professional development and the training that they got through ACDC, they're now equipped with new skills to support the community. And now, post the ACDC project, they're like, wow, I've become a better person because of this project. And we still have that continued partnership, even post the project, which is great. It's still adding value to our organisation.
The project ACDC is funded by the Department of Social Services, part of their ILC, the Information Linkages and Capacity Building Project, which has made it possible to roll this project out right across Australia in regional, rural and metro Australia and every state and territory.
In general, it was quite a positive initiative. I'm hoping that this project can continue in the future.
So I would definitely encourage other organisations to partner with CMHA.
It's ultimately going to help all the services in the local area. It's going to mean that people are more aware of how to seek support appropriately. It's going to mean that there's more connection happening amongst service providers. Ultimately, what that means is that people know more about mental health, there's less stigma in the community, and then they're able to support seek as soon as they're able to identify a concern. And we know that the burden of mental health is very significant, so the longer you leave it unchecked, the more it costs everybody.
Great. I will point out that at the end I'll provide the the email too for Raimonda Dykewell, who's who's managing the project at the moment, ACDC Project there. And so, if there's any inquiries or questions or follow-ups you would like to make to her, you'll have her contact details at the end of this presentation. This next, I should note before we just pass there, something I didn't say before. The ACDC project was delivered through community partners. So in other words, we partnered with local community organizations in the communities where the project was at. And we had some wonderful partners, and you saw some of them in that video, but that was just a small selection of some of the partners. So the partner organizations really benefited, the community benefited. And I think too, the 70 or so people that we trained as people connectors found it a really useful part of their skills and to add to their repertoire of competencies for the work that we do, or the work that they do. So this is one of those confusing visual, try to get everything in one picture images there. The project, the ACDC project, has the first stage of stakeholder engagement that often went for about 2 months or so before we actually had boots on the ground, as it were, finding out the details and working with the local partner organization to really get a detailed sense of what's happening there. And one of the things we often found, as was said in the video, is actually when you get right to the coal face, there are lots of small little tiny community groups and services, often with no promotional budget. Sometimes people on the other side of the block don't even exist, but they present at least opportunities for social connection. And in the absence of other services, they are great, and indeed I think are part of the health of any community. There are lots of these little shoots. I kind of liken them to the mycelium network, if you know what that is, in healthy soil that runs all through the soil when the soil is really healthy. You got these little kind of social roots and shoots that are happening and connecting people in all sorts of healthy ways. So that's great when you get down to that particular level. Then there's the training and support and the upskilling of the people connectors. And how long does it learn to take to how to knock on a door? Well, it takes at least a week, if not a little bit longer, plus some ongoing, if you like, coaching, professional development to get it right and to deal with the issues that arise. And that's on top of people's experience that they will have already brought to the role. Most of the people had some sort of experience and skills and qualifications. And if ideally, a lot of the time, peer workers as well too, where we could, always that was a preference. Then the proactive outreach activities of going to door, where there's a conversation primarily, provision of information products, which we took a long time curating. Probably the key one for us was the development of a fairly large size fridge magnet that provided some numbers and contacts of local services or broader services. We found that to be very useful, and in the follow-ups have found that people have still got those on months, if not a year later, still on the fridge, and they'll probably still be sitting there for the next couple of years. Ideally, we want to update them if we could, but that's been really interesting to see how well the fridge magnet's gone in the information products. The survey, yes, it was too long, but it has given us an extraordinary data set. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides in terms of the findings and where we could connect people to supports. If we could put more resources into that, we would have, and would like to do that if the project evolves forward. And the data, lastly, the local advocacy, the data that we collected has been produced in it. Every single site has its own community report, which is a summary of all the key made data we found in that community. That's been really useful for local services in their advocacy, and both to local politicians and service providers and funders. And overall, throughout the whole process, there is this community awareness raising. So looking at the data, the activity data for the round. So as I said, 28 communities engaged, 52,000 doors knocked, 9,000 plus conversations. Of the engagement where people connectors knocked, 36% of the doors were opened. That doesn't mean people were inside, not opening. That just means people are not home. So that's an interesting perspective. I mean, about a third of all houses, there's somebody at home during the day, which I guess if you're in the breaking and entering profession, I've just given away a terrible secret. Of those who answered the door, 47% had a conversation with the people connectors. Many people were too busy. They're going off to pick up the kids, etc., etc. So that's actually a really, quite a really good number. And the survey sample size, and it's a big detailed survey, as I said, just slightly under 5,000, which is we will get over that in the next round, which will be starting off soon. Some other project outcome data: 78% of people put on the fridge magnets, etc. I'll jump over this, except just to note maybe as a result of the visit, 31% of people contacted a professional service or community organisation to ask about their support. 59% of people talk with a family member about their own mental health and wellbeing as a result of the conversation. So that all this data is given out more in detail in those research reports that I said before. So there's both an evaluation purpose to the review of the project and a research purpose to explore the survey data. So some of the data we'll look at quickly. I can see time's going on. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions at the end here. So I apologize that I'm going to be skipping through this now. It's the old problem, always too many slides for the amount of time we've got, and everything always takes longer than you thought. So yes, psychological distress, very high out there, right across the whole of Australia. We did use the K10 here. The reason we did that, and I know there's some critiques of that particular tool, is that it allows us to compare this data set to that of the ABS, for example, Australian Bureau of Statistics, and other data sets, the Hilda survey, etc. And the level of distress that we found, when you take time to talk to people, to win their trust, rather than just something that's a bit quick and sharp, as often happens with some of the other surveys through Roy Morgan or the ABS, the level of distress is really high out there, and possibly no surprise to people, but that's part of the picture of our national psyche right now. The extent to which people were accessing services varied through different demographics and communities, and there's some quick data there for those that are fast reading. People with mental health needs often face several compounding challenges which directly impacted on their well-being, and these were some of them. Yes, as we've heard on the news all the time, financial stress is really significant. During the COVID-19 pandemic, COVID, of course, was very, very important. Housing, again, no surprise there. A significant problem, both a large problem and a medium problem for many people there. Concerns about climate change was one that surprised us, surprised some of us. I wasn't surprised. I knew that was out there, particularly amongst young people there, but it's a thing, and it's really out there. And it shows that people are not just concerned about their own immediate personal circumstances, but have worries about what's happening in the world. And so, I hate to bring up the issue of what's happening in the news at the moment, but all those issues add to the kind of temperature of mental distress that's out there right now. Physical health issues and others. There's a longer list in the research report. Then we also asked the extent about various challenges and social determinants of mental health. And again, these were all ones that are, continue on with the that's continuous with the previous list, some of the other issues there. People with disability had significantly higher distress and higher loneliness. Householders were responsive to informal conversations about mental health, and welcomed the opportunity to receive information about supports and services. Obviously that was very pleasing, and the details are there in the report. The one-off visits, in some cases with short-term follow-up, resulted in tangible outcomes for many households. The households sought support for more immediate issues to help address their mental health and well-being. each of these is just the top headline. The details are ones that you'll need to explore if you want to go more deeply into the research reports that I've cited there. Addressing the more high complex support needs of householders in high risk circumstances was challenging. That was hard. But people connectors were often able to provide assistance even in those really difficult circumstances, and we had some doozies. Certain household cohorts were particularly responsive and appreciative of the door knocking visit, and again the data is in there. The proactive outreach aspect of door knocking was largely helpful, but particular cultural and social conditions challenged its effectiveness. So there were some sites where it was difficult, and again the details and what those factors were we discuss in the report. As I said before, a very high correlation between the social determinants and psychological distress. And so, again, that's showing part of the correlation there, which you can get if you go in again to the report. I keep saying that, it's getting a bit monotonous. And we've already looked at one of some of the many reasons why people don't access social and mental health supports. Of course, they don't exist or there's big gaps, but there are personal barriers. And these are some of the ones we looked at those briefly. And I had the top 6 before, and there's a few more that are significant and important as well too. There was interesting differences in the local data. So there is a significant variability depending upon where you go and where you do a project like this. And so, for example, affordability is a major barrier from 14% of people in the Macedon Ranges, but 41% in Toowoomba. Stigma ranged from 3% in the Macedon Ranges to 57% in Burnie. So you've got to be very cautious with making over large generalizations about mental health of Australians. It really depends, and the factors affecting it depends upon where you are and who you're talking about. A few other findings. There was a large hidden landscape of micro community groups I mentioned before. For many people with significant unmet needs, checking in with them at their homes is often the only effective way of connecting. We found people who hadn't spoken to another human being for 3 months, for example. They're not the people that are just going to come along to a nice event to talk about mental health. You only get to those guys if you actually go out there and get right onto at the coalface and the ground level there. And for a number of people, this was an interesting finding. A single door knocking conversation was personally impactful. And this is from the evaluation report, somebody described it as a spark or a boost. And one householder offered a metaphor that someone has lit a match in the dark for them. And that now was a candle indicating a lasting light that they can light for others. And there are many, many other people that spoke, sometimes which were just in the right place at the right time to have that nice conversation with somebody other for up to an hour or so about how they're going in life and their well-being, with people that were really good at listening there. And that was just a real turnaround and a turning point for some people, regardless of what else actually happened. So again, the safety warning that I mentioned before, and that's why the training is so important. That's why the no agenda approach is so important. I would hate to see this process co-opted by organizations just out there touting their service, trying to get customers for their service. Yes, you can do that, but it needs to be really solidly under the umbrella of no agenda. You wouldn't forbid an organization for communicating about those services, but you don't want to give that sense of pushing or trying to get people into services. You just want to let people know what's available should they choose and want to need it. So the websites, acdc.org.au. There is the CEO's website. There is somebody coming into that role very shortly. As I mentioned, Ray's email is there. The wonderful Ray is there, and I encourage you to talk to her. She's probably going to kill me for saying that. And my own particular email there too, particularly if anybody wants to, I'm now a gun for hire, so if anybody wants to look me up and have a conversation about proactive outreach in their organization or anything similar, let me know. And yeah,